Hey, this is Joe Hubbard from JoeHubbardBassVideos.com coming at you today with another lesson. And this is the first lesson in my jazz improvisation course, Creating Jazz Lines. Today's lesson is on the minor 7th chord, so with that in mind, grab your bass and let's get started. All bass lines and melodies are a combination of stepwise movement, up or down, or movement by skips, which are intervals greater than a major second. With that in mind, both scales, which are steps, and arpeggios, which are skips, must be practiced. However, the study of scales and arpeggios is often taught incorrectly, where the extent of such practice is limited to repeatedly run the arpeggios or scales up and down the fingerboard. This does little to develop melodic statements within the realm of functional bass lines or improvised solos. Many people attempt to learn scales first because they are led to believe that it is the easiest and fastest way to learn how to improvise over a set of chord changes. But when a problem occurs that is exacerbated by not understanding the notes that are acceptable to resolve their lines on within the given scale, this so-called catch-all scale remedy often leads to confusion and frustration. Merely running up and down the scale only will provide you with a thin veneer in outlining the chord changes and lacks specificity over generalization in defining the overall harmonic structure. With that said, it is the chord tones that clearly outline the harmonic structure and thus should be the starting point with developing a command and mastery of the instrument. Scales do have their place, but without the support of chord tone application first, the lines just don't come out as well. There's been many applications within this course that have highlighted the use of arpeggios, both in the horizontal fingerings and also in the vertical fingerings. We must remember that those 5 positional system fingerings that we covered are really useful when transcending from one chord to the next without having to shift position to do so. However, the horizontal positions are of great importance because those really lay out the spatial relationship of the instrument. And we have to know that, and we have to know how to shift from one position to the next. So when we're playing these particular exercises, we're really going to look at these completely with this horizontal fingering approach across our instrument. So just as a review, let me run through that fingering that we had in that horizontal position for the minor 7th chord. So hopefully by now you've learned this fingering, and you also understand all the vertical applications for the minor 7th chord as well. Once this arpeggio is learned in this fashion, what we need to do now is focus on breaking up the ideas that point us to a musical application. This is paramount at this stage. In this next exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to take the arpeggio and we're going to break it up into groups of 3 notes, basically 3-note chord inversions. By organizing the arpeggio in this way, we're going to create polyrhythmic applications to the chord. This is a 3 against 4 feel when it's played in 16th notes. Because we're regrouping the arpeggio into 3-note cells, when we play those in groups of 4 notes rhythmically, it's going to sound kind of cool, and the listener's not going to be able to catch on to that straight away. And therefore it creates its own embellishment. So with these rhythmic embellishments, we can take just chord tones, add a rhythmic embellishment, and we really don't need a harmonic or melodic embellishment because the embellishment is the rhythm that we're working on. So let me clarify this and show you exactly what I mean by putting it into 3-note inversions. So if we take the notes of the chord and I play the root, the flat 3, the 5, and then the flat 3, the 5, the flat 7, and then the 5, the flat 7, the root, the root, the flat 3, the 5, and the flat 3, the 5, and the flat 7. So what we're doing is we are literally inverting it in 3 notes. So, and note that the first note in every group is a chord tone. So when you first start doing this, I want you to look at this and say, yeah, that's root 3, 5, 3, 5, 7, 5, 7, root, 7, root, 3, root, 3, 5, 3, 5, 7. And then we're coming back down the same way, all ascending. This exercise is all ascending. You'll find that when you do this, coming back down, that's more challenging than when you go up. Because we're used to, when we ascend, we're used to playing ascending lines. When we descend, you default to playing descending lines. So if you play an ascending line, when you descend, it's harder and more technically challenging to get that together and get that clear. So you want to be able to do both. So this is a great exercise to get started with this stuff. So remember as well that once you can do the sort of recognition of the root, the 3, the 5, and go through all of that sequentially, then I want you to say, use signposts for the first note of each 3-note group and go root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, root, 3rd, root, 7, 5, 3rd, root. So you understand that and understand where they are. If you learn this as a disconnected pattern, you're never going to be able to use it. You must really focus in and concentrate when you practice. When you practice, you have to switch your brain on. We've already discussed that. You also have to adjust your concentration levels. If your concentration levels are low, you're not going to take much in. If they're super high, it's going to be quicker for you to go through something and retain it. Remember, learn, practice, absorb, functionalize, and maintain. Most people just learn and practice, they never absorb. So concentration levels need to be turned up. So as we do that, we then want to be sure that we're playing these 3-note groups rhythmically in 16th notes and not triplets, okay? Now, I want you to note that if you're really struggling with this, then go ahead and play them in triplets just so you can get it under your fingers. But make sure that as time goes on, that this is just a stepping stone to you playing these in 16s. So if I check out this exercise and I'm going, if I just play it evenly, you won't really be able to tell whether it's triplets or whether it's 16s. If I just go, because there's no reference of a pulse. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the reference of the pulse. This is very challenging to do. I encourage you all to practice these rhythm exercises in this way to get these down. Really slow it down and painstakingly go through it in the beginning so you can get this happening. What I also want you to do is practice these over chord pad drones. And that means that you want to get like a sort of pad sound on your home keyboard. Put a sustain sound on it. Let it sustain just forever. Don't do it to any kind of metronomic time. Just have it sustain. And then you can practice these over this, and you don't really have to have a time thing going on. You can slow down and speed up, just as long as you understand to get the notes even while you're learning it. This is a great learning tool, and also it really gets the sound of the actual chord and the lines that you're playing over the chord into your head. exercise simply inverts the three-note groupings into a descending figure. So it's going to go 3-5-1, 7-5-3, etc. while moving up and back down the fingerboard. The technically challenging thing here will be playing the descending pattern while moving up the fretboard. So let me show you what I mean. We're just turning all the patterns around and playing them descending. So I'm going 5-3-1, then 7-5-3, then root 7-5, then 3 root 7, 5-3 root, and then 7-5-3. And this is going again. Try to count while you play this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. The idea is that when I'm playing the whole thing, from the broken arpeggio exercise number 1, we're now going to add some embellishment to these chord tones that will add melodic variety. On the first note of each three-note group, we're going to place a diatonic note from above pointing to the chord tone. This creates a sequential four-note pattern that is comprised of 3 chord tones and a diatonic scale tone. Because we're concentrating on the minor 7th chord functioning as a 2 minor 7 in a major key area, the chord scale used will be the Dorian mode. Now this scale is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, and then back to 1. This is built from the 2nd degree of the relative major key. Let's break this down. What we're doing is we're taking each 3-note group. Remember we had those 3-note groups. This is broken arpeggio exercise number 1. The first 3 notes is C, E flat, and G, root 3, 5. I'm going to place a diatonic note in front of that belongs to the scale. So the first note of the 4-note sequence is going to be a scale note that is pointing to the first note of the 3-note pattern. And the first note of the 3-note pattern is the root, so we're going to have the 2nd approaching the root, and then we continue the pattern. So it gives us a 4-note sequential pattern, which sounds like this, which is very cool once I start adding it in and sequencing it through the actual minor 7th chord. So into the 3rd, because the next 3-note pattern starts on the 3rd, I'm going to approach that from above from the 4th and have this. Then the next one starts on the 5th. I'm going to approach that from above from the 6th. Then I'm going to approach the next note, which is the next 3-note group starts on the 7th. So the scale approach is going to be the root. Okay, the root's a chord tone, but it also doubles as a diatonic approach note here. Then we move it up because we're back to our first group again, and we have the first 3-note group was the C, E flat, and G, root 3, 5. So I'm playing the D again. Okay, and then I move that up here to approach the 3rd with the 4th. And I have this pattern, so now I've got this. back down in the same way that I played going up. That gives us some really cool lines. These lines are workable straight out of the box. You can use these as patterns over chords. It's down to your imagination how you actually use these. Now you go practice. By borrowing the formula from the broken arpeggio exercise number 2, this is going to give us those descending 3-note patterns. Remember, they went 5-3 root, 7-5-3, root 7-5, 3 root 7, 5-3 root, and then 7-5-3. So by placing a chromatic approach note below the first note of each one of those 3-note groups, we end up with this. I've got the approach note below the 5th. I've got it below the flat 7, below the root, below the flat 3, below the 5th, and then below the flat 7. So what happens is some of those notes are going to be diatonic and some are going to be non-diatonic. Let's look at the first one. The first one's non-diatonic. That means it's not in that Dorian mode. So we've got this here. Adds a lot of tension and release once it's resolved to the chord tones. The next one is diatonic. This is the 6th degree of the scale. The next one is non-diatonic. This is a B natural going into the root, then to the flat 7 and the 5. Then the next one is diatonic. That's the 2nd going into the flat 3. And then I'm back to the chromatic into the 5th, which is non-diatonic, and the chromatic into the flat 7, which is diatonic. So the whole thing exercise combines the patterns from exercises 1.4 and 1.5. The result is a mixed idea between the ascending 3-note pattern with the diatonic scale note from above and the descending 3-note pattern with the chromatic approach from below. It should be pointed out that these simple ideas are found in a multitude of bass lines and solos. Just check out people like James Jamerson and Jaco Pastorius, and you'll hear these ideas throughout all of their playing. Taking a look at this idea of mixing these two concepts, I'm going to play the first idea, which is the diatonic scale note from above with the ascending 3-note patterns ascending. So I do this. And then when I descend, I'm playing the chromatic approach from below with the descending 3-note patterns. So the whole thing sounds like this. up today's lesson, but before we go, let's take a look at what we've learned. In today's lesson, you have learned how to create rhythmic illusion in your lines by regrouping the notes of the minor 7th chord into 3-note cells, both ascending and descending. You've also learned how to embellish your bass lines and solos over a minor 7th chord by using improvisational devices such as diatonic approach notes and chromatic approach notes. We've then learned how to put this all together and practice over chord pad drones to solidify the sound of the chord into your subconscious. As always, practice smart, work hard, and play creatively. I'll be checking in with you next week for lesson 2. So until then, take care.